In the heart of the Islamic Golden Age, when Baghdad stood as the crown jewel of learning, a scholar rose whose brilliance would echo for centuries. His name was Abu Nasr al-Farabi, remembered in history as al-Muallim al-Thani, the second teacher, second only to the great Aristotle. Born around 872 CE in the city of Farab in Central Asia, al-Farabi's early life was humble, but his thirst for knowledge was boundless. From a young age, he was drawn to philosophy, mathematics, and the sciences, disciplines that flourished under the Abbasid Caliphate. His journey eventually led him to Baghdad, the intellectual heart of the Islamic world, where scholars from all corners of the empire gathered to translate, study, and expand the works of the ancients. In Baghdad, al-Farabi immersed himself in the writings of Aristotle and Plato. He mastered Greek philosophy through the Arabic translations of scholars before him, and soon his own commentaries began to surpass those of his predecessors. What made al-Farabi remarkable was not just that he preserved the wisdom of the Greeks, but that he expanded it, molding it into a unique vision that blended reason with the principles of Islam. He was called the second teacher because he stood as the true heir of Aristotle's legacy, ensuring that the flame of philosophy continued to burn bright. One of al-Farabi's greatest contributions was his work on logic. He believed logic was the foundation upon which all sciences rested. To him, logic was not merely a tool for debate, but the key to unlocking truth itself. He refined Aristotle's ideas, organizing them in a way that made them more accessible for students of his time. Through his writings, he gave future generations a roadmap to clear thinking, a skill as vital then as it is today. His logical works were studied not only in the Islamic world but later in Europe, where they shaped medieval thought and influenced scholars like Thomas Aquinas. But al-Farabi was more than just a philosopher of the mind. He was also a philosopher of society. In his celebrated book Al-Madina al-Fadila, The Virtuous City, he imagined the ideal state. Like Plato's Republic, al-Farabi's city was led by a ruler who was wise, just, and guided by reason, almost like a philosopher king. But he went further, weaving in Islamic values of justice, unity, and moral responsibility. To him, the purpose of the state was not simply to enforce laws, but to guide its people toward virtue and ultimate happiness. This vision of governance inspired later Islamic thinkers and even influenced the way leadership and politics were discussed in medieval Europe. But al-Farabi was more than just a philosopher of the mind. He was also a philosopher of society. In his celebrated book Al-Madina al-Fadila, The Virtuous City, he imagined the ideal state. Like Plato's Republic, al-Farabi's city was led by a ruler who was wise, just, and guided by reason, almost like a philosopher king. But he went further, weaving in Islamic values of justice, unity, and moral responsibility. To him, the purpose of the state was not simply to enforce laws, but to guide its people toward virtue and ultimate happiness. This vision of governance inspired later Islamic thinkers and even influenced the way leadership and politics were discussed in medieval Europe. Al-Farabi's genius did not stop with philosophy and politics. He was a master of the arts and sciences as well. Perhaps surprisingly, he had a deep love for music. His monumental work, Kitab al-Musik al-Kabir, the Great Book of Music, explored not only the theory of sound, but also how music affects the human soul. He studied rhythm, harmony, and melody, and even designed musical instruments. To al-Farabi, music was not mere entertainment, but a science that connected deeply to the emotions and spirit of humanity. His studies influenced musicians and theorists for generations. Though he lived a life of scholarship and simplicity, his legacy was immense. He passed away in Damascus around 950 CE, but his works lived on, copied and studied in libraries from Cairo to Cordoba. His vision of knowledge, that reason and faith, science and philosophy, society and music could all be woven together, remains one of the most inspiring chapters in human history. Today, al-Farabi is remembered not only as the second teacher, but as one of the greatest architects of knowledge in Islamic civilization. His story reminds us that true wisdom is not found in power or wealth, but in the pursuit of truth, in the harmony of mind and spirit, and in the courage to dream of a better world.